Hi, Steve and Caleb here with another edition of Smith Busters. And today, Caleb, you have something very special for us, I understand?
Super special. So today's special Smith Buster is that you should not mount your optics on your handguard rail.
Okay. Is this a hard and fast rule? What do we got?
So there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of variables as well. But the general rule of thumb is that you should not so if you look between your handguard and the receiver, there's that gap.
Right.
And you shouldn't mount your optics on the handguard or bridge that gap.
Okay.
So mount them over that gap. Because the handguard, not being an actual integral part of the receiver itself, can flex a little bit, and that can affect your point of aim, point of impact.
I see. So this is a myth that's come up over and over again?
So I've done some research on it, and I've looked into it, and there's some live fire tests out there as well. It's not a myth. In most cases, and this mainly applies, so the shift tends to be more dramatic with your cheaper handguards, and usually here I would say Chinese handguards, but there's a lot of lower-end American handguards as well, unfortunately, and that's where it affects it the most. So your solid mount-up systems, like this Midwest Industries right here, you know, there can be point of impact shift with anything as far as mounting it on the handguard, but the higher quality of a handguard you have, the less it's going to be. And, you know, there's some out there, like even like, you know, your Geissele's and stuff like that, with those super solid mounting systems. As long as you're mounting the optic close to where it mounts to the receiver, there's typically no issue. But if you mount it a little further out, obviously, since most of your flex is coming from up here, whether you're shooting on a bag or off a bipod, that's where most of the flex is going to be, so there's not a huge difference here.
Right. Some of those handguards have a long barrel nut that comes with them, and then they clamp directly to that barrel nut. You've got aluminum on steel.
Yep.
And there's not going to be any flex right there, right in front of the receiver.
Yeah, so the longer barrel nuts are definitely a more solid option as far as minimizing flex in the handguard itself.
Right. Now, the little clip-on two-piece with the Picatinny rail on top, probably don't want to mount an optic on those?
You know, pretty much any drop-in handguard or even the more of the clamp-ons that clamp to your traditional barrel nuts as well when you remove the delta ring and stuff like that. Probably not a good option on those either. But so there can be some point of impact shift, and I would argue, you know, people mount, in the military specifically, they mount lasers and, you know, D-balls and different things like that on the end of the handguard, where the most flex is going to be happening. And yes, I'm sure there's probably some point of impact shift whenever they're shooting off of a bag or on a corner, posted up on a corner or something like that. But it's so minimal, it doesn't matter at the distances they're shooting at.
Right. Okay. So for CQB, you could do that and get away with it, no problem.
Sure. Yeah. And, you know, another argument is whenever you bridge the gap, if you have, you know, one of your mounting clamps or contacting the receiver rail, the other's contacting the handguard rail, and you drop your firearm, it gets hit really hard or something like that on the handguard, that can affect your point of aim, point of impact, because that rail can actually shift slightly.
Sure.
And yeah, and that's why there's, you know, different mounting systems such as anti-rotation tabs as well.
Oh, okay.
And then another thing we need to touch here before we conclude this is monolithic upper receivers. So receivers that are built all in one piece. You have your upper receiver and handguard all solid. Those, I say, you know, go for it.
Right. So you can mount your aim point all the way on the end of the rail if you want to.
So we've done some videos on why that would be a bad idea optic-wise, usability-wise. So no, I wouldn't say do that, but for, you know, the purpose of this myth, sure, go for it.
All right. So we're pretty much agreed that it's not usually a good idea.
It's not usually a good idea. I say plausible. There can be some issues with it.
All right. Sounds good. So if you agree or disagree, please leave us a comment down below. And don't forget to smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't done it already, and we'll see you next time with another edition of Smith Busters.